All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're stepping into a world of breathtaking darkness and, honestly, some profound psychological weight. We are journeying deep into the subterranean depths to witness the descents of the Crimson Sentinel. We're going to trace a path through some really heavy Nietzschean philosophy here, exploring the horrifying mindset of a being known as the Shadow Sovereign. So brace yourselves, because we are preparing to descend into the absolute depths of intellectual despair.
Up is a heavy descent into the mud. Now that is the absolute law of the subterranean uncanny valley. We're talking about a mountain city where reality itself has shattered, kind of like a silver-backed mirror. In this inverted metropolis, gravity is completely subverted. The mountain's peak actually points towards the Earth's core, and the ceiling, well, that serves as the floor. So to go up in this place is to literally sink into the mud of the herd, while going down is this dizzying, terrifying climb toward a vacant throne. It's a complete mind-bending inversion of how we normally perceive growth, and it acts as a really grim, dark mirror to our own psychological traps when we're too afraid to move forward.
So what's driving this entire tragic trajectory? It all boils down to a single concept, Untergang. In Nietzschean philosophy and philology, this literally translates to a downward going or going under. But linguistically, it's so much more than that. It signifies a plunge into absolute intellectual despair, a total unmaking of the self. And this exact word forms a philosophical architecture for the fall of our antagonist, the Shadow Sovereign, otherwise known as the demon of cynical knowledge. His whole existence isn't defined by elevation or enlightenment, but by this deliberate, suffocating descent straight into resentment and shadow.
You know, to really understand the daemon, we have to look at his horrifying origins. He's born from the rotting malice of Nidhogg and the echoes of the dragon deer. He's this creature of pure, concentrated resentment, completely infused by the dark zeitgeist, the crow, with the intellectual despair of failed architects. Think of him as a dark reflection of our own wasted potential, right? He stalks this inverted world, beginning his reign over a city built entirely on the ashes of shattered beliefs.
Okay, so how does this grim kingdom actually work? It's governed by a core law known as the mirror of gravity. Just the phrase itself suggests a reflection that pulls you down, a heavy distortion of what's real. And this is the daemon's ultimate philosophy. It's a worldview that prioritizes the absolute possession of a single moment, held so intensely that it just extinguishes fluid life forever. See, the daemon acts as an intellectual salvager. He doesn't care about growth at all. He's hoarding time itself, making sure that everything remains static, frozen, and absolutely under his control. It's shockingly similar to how grief or deep trauma can freeze a human mind in time.
And he enforces this static control with an incredibly brutal arsenal of psychological stasis. He unleashes an ionized gale called the breath of the void, which literally siphons the warmth of ambition right out of the environment. He actively strips away the gold of stories, that inherent value you get from any hard-won victory, and smelts that lived experience back into the heavy, dull lead of mortality. He is actively harvesting the potential of evolving souls just to fuel his lonely throne. He's weaving this massive web of control to ensure every psyche in the city becomes nothing more than a monument to permanence. As the daemon sinks further into his Untergang, his dark evolution takes on a new, even more tragic form. He adopts the mask of the Pale Redeemer and becomes the tragic Knight of Memory. He basically sets himself up as the final guardian of the Iron Threshold. But here is the profound tragedy of the whole thing. The path he is so fiercely guarding, the path to the Grail, it's completely empty. He's wandering a paradox of his own making, defending an absolute void, simply because he's terrified of his own darkness and the sheer uncertainty of what might lie beyond it.
As this Knight of Memory, his method of control is absolute, no questions asked. He uses silver guilt and iron laws to ruthlessly punish the soul for its past failures. He demands perfect stillness from every single psyche he encounters. By weaponizing their own history and their guilt, which, let's be honest, is a psychological trap we all fall into way too often, he ensures they stay perfectly frozen in place. And why does he do it? So that no one ever moves forward enough to realize that the throne he is protecting is actually vacant.
Now we arrive at a devastating philosophical crossroads. The daemon offers these weary travelers the Pharisees' paradox. It's essentially a gilded cage of absolute truths, framing the heavy burden of the past as if it were protective armor. It's the incredibly seductive promise of absolute safety, but the price tag is complete subservience. He uses this cage to hide the terrifying alternative, the logic of the crucible. This is the transformative, existential, and, yeah, often really painful, fire of true growth and change. He vehemently denies the crucible, because for him, the pain of actually living is just too much to bear.
This terminal spiritual entropy is the very core of the daemon's existence. He looks at the reckless freedom of becoming and views it as a dangerous fever. He is so deeply, profoundly fearful of the unpredictable nature of real, fluid life that he would literally rather entomb his spirit in a leaden box than face the unpredictable stars of a truly dancing life. Think about that. He voluntarily turns his own potential, and the potential of anyone he traps, into crumbling dust, all because the unpredictable fire of life is just too terrifying for him to control. But the inevitability of this Untergang finally has to break, bringing us to its apocalyptic climax. We arrive at the center of the convergence, where absolute judgment is handed down. But it's not delivered by some traditional god, no. It's handed down by the dark manifestations of the universe itself, the Crow and the Violet Knight. Together, they deliver the Violet Verdict. The universe, in all its dark, fluid, messy complexity, finally pushes back against his absolute stasis.
And what follows is an agonizing evolution. It's this visceral, horrible ritual of self-destruction. It begins as the violet gavel expands, swelling to match the immense spiritual weight of the daemon's own despair. When it finally strikes, it violently crushes his internal gods of memory, reason, and will, the very pillars that held up his frozen reality. His physical form corrupts, his fur shifts into this twilight violet-blue hue, capturing the dying energy trapped somewhere between negation and creation. And finally, his eyes ignite with a feral, piercing crimson-red glow. His sovereign mind is brutally, completely executed.
Those crimson eyes, they mark a soul that has, in the truest Nietzschean sense, murdered God in order to take absolute authority over reality. But the great, terrible tragedy is realized way too late. Becoming your own absolute judge doesn't actually bring freedom. It brings an unbearable, maddening weight. It is a crimson burden that shatters the mind trapped beneath it, leaving absolutely nothing but madness in its wake.
From that agonizing execution of his own mind, the Crimson Sentinel wakes up. He is no longer the calculating shadow sovereign we knew. He's completely degenerated into a feral man-beast. This right here is the terminal synthesis of Faustian despair and pure, raw animal survival. He is forever trapped at the iron threshold now, stalking the dark refractions of the city, just to violently pull any evolving soul right back into the stagnant mud. His ultimate, terrifying goal is to entomb the spirit of becoming itself inside a living, leaden box of absolute, frozen obedience.
But listen, even in the deepest, darkest trenches of this uncanny valley, there is a rebellion against this monument of permanence. It's called the Grave Dance. It is a radical, existential act of joyful affirmation. The absolute only way a seeker can survive the Crimson Sentinel isn't by trying to fight his iron laws with more logic, it's by shattering his leaden philosophy entirely. It's making the conscious choice to embrace the fluid, unpredictable light of the Creator. It's choosing a joyful, dynamic existence over the illusion of static safety.
Which brings us to the ultimate psychological weight of this entire fable. When you are faced with the paralyzing, heavy guilt of your own past and the terrifying, chaotic unpredictability of the future, what are you going to choose? Are you going to surrender to the comfortable, gilded cage of absolute stasis, just allowing your potential to decay away in a leaden box? Or will you risk the agonizing fire of the crucible, step out into the terrifying unknown, and perform the grave dance of a truly living soul?